Hey, what's up, everybody? How we doing? I just want to make sure my my audio is all synced up, so you guys will have to let me know. I'm gonna just talk and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me know if it's all synced up. We got the new setup here, so I just want to make sure everything is working before we hit takeoff here. So just let me know in the chat here how it's looking. Sorry, the two windows are super bright. The sun's coming in from this direction. I just got some blackout curtains. I didn't have time to set them up. But if everything looks good, we can go ahead and get started. So let's do it. Let me just make sure my throat's all cleared out. We're on just a run of cold weather in Minnesota, so the cold symptoms are in full force. All right. Let me turn the music off. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Welcome in, everybody, to a brand new edition of the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. Welcome in live chat here on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. It's going to be a really fun episode here. I know I say that every single time, but seriously, I am setting up something I haven't really done too much of with this podcast, and that's going to be an actual series of sorts through this podcast. My goal is that every Wednesday around this time here at about 4 o'clock Eastern, we're going to knock out a division of this Fix My Team series here, where we're going to talk about how much cap space every team has, who the impending free agents are, and where my priorities would lie for those teams. Now, that stretches it out about 2 months. I might need to do 2 a week now that I say that, to do it all before free agency. So could be twice a week here for the series. But in this episode, we're just going to be doing the NFC West, the lucky winners of the first division for the series. I see a super chat question coming in already from Joey. He says, if you bring back Adams for Green Bay and everyone else leaves, would you bring back Adams and let everyone else leave, or bring everyone else back but bring back Adams? Well, it's not going to have to be that polarizing of a decision for Green Bay. They're going to be able to push cap into the future, but if it had to be one or the other, I guess I'd rather keep Adams because the players that are leaving aren't as essential. But I don't think it's so cut and dry. But I answered that because I want to let you guys know I will be doing mailbag after I do the NFC West here. So as I rip through the Patreon mailbag questions, I will be doing live super chats as well. So Joey, thank you so much for the support. You're amazing. All of you coming in with super chats here on the podcast, I appreciate you. But if you can, please hold on to those until we get to the mailbag portion so that we can rip through the Fix My Team section of the podcast. Before we get started with that, I want to let you guys know this podcast, this channel is brought to you by my amazing supporters on Patreon. That is patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can not just support my channel, but you'll get great exclusive content there as well. We are into draft season now, which means the full TFG Draft Insider package is available there on Patreon. So if you enjoy my top 10 positional videos, we just did quarterbacks last week, film breakdowns, you want to get access to my complete comprehensive draft board that has my full player profiles with strengths, weaknesses, individual trait grades, descriptions, you name it, on every podcast. Every prospect in this class, it is available to you on Patreon. Go ahead and check that out. You'll support my channel in the process, and thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters. You will also be able to submit questions to this show there on Patreon through the direct messages and the mailbag. So it's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. And I also might as well mention my SeatGeek promo code, that It's, what is it? Franchise Guy on SeatGeek. Use promo code Franchise Guy on SeatGeek. Not a lot of sports in force right now, so not going to spend a lot of time there. But if you happen to be buying tickets, do it on SeatGeek. It's the best app, and use promo code Franchise Guy. You'll save $20 on your first purchase. All right, let's do it, man. We are going to get into the NFC West teams' off-seasons and do a sort of off-season preview along with what I would do to kind of try and fix these teams. So we're going to start with the Seattle Seahawks, and the NFC West is a good place to start here because all these teams have very fascinating off-seasons ahead of them, to be honest. And the Seattle Seahawks are no different because their quarterback, Russell Wilson, is kind of in the picture here with this massive quarterback carousel conversation that's going on this offseason, right? There's like 5 to 10 quarterbacks that we don't know. Are they on the move? Are they staying put? Well, Russell Wilson's one of those guys. So the Seattle Seahawks heading into this offseason are actually 8th in the NFL in terms of cap space available with $36 million, which isn't a ton. But again, coming off a year with a reduced salary cap, a lot of these teams, those cap numbers look small now, but with the way these teams are going to be able to push cap into future seasons, you know, it fluctuates by team, but you can probably add about 20 plus million per team if they want to get flexible and aggressive in free agency. So that's why I want to specify the ranking of cap space with them at 8th, and then also mention $36 million in room as well. Both those numbers put some things into perspective. And their impending free agency list is not small. You have a couple guys in the offensive line, 2 starters, Dwayne Brown, left tackle, really old guy, getting, he's starting to regress, certainly. And then Ethan Pocic, your starting center. You also have Rashad Penny, who broke out late in this season. He's an interesting impending free agent. Could be a spark plug for that run game for a full season if they could bring him back. You've got both tight ends, Gerald Everett, Will Dissly, both impending free agents. So a lot of pieces on that offense to take a look at. And then on the defense, you've got Al Woods, a solid veteran nose tackle, and some pieces in the secondary with DJ Reed, Quandre Diggs, and Sidney Jones, 3 starters there, all impending free agents. So a lot of work for the Seahawks to do there, and they've got some room to operate. Of course, it all starts with priority number 1, and that is making sure Russ is your quarterback, because if the answer to that is yes, then you can look at this free agency group and say, we got to be a little more aggressive to get some of these guys back. If you let Russ go, if you trade Russ, you might be entering more of a rebuild stage, right? I think Russ is back. I think Seattle has no interest in trading him. I think Russ is pretty cool with coming back. I think he likes the idea of floating out there that he's interested in these other teams. He likes to leverage his power and remind the Seahawks, you're not really much without me at this point. So I understand this, but in all reality, I don't see Russell Wilson going anywhere. I don't think Russ has the power he thinks he does to force his hand out of there. I think the Seahawks can just say, look, Russ, we're not trading you. If you want to play, we're going to put a good team around you next year, hopefully, but we're not going to just trade you because you want to be. That's not the way the NFL works. I think when push comes to shove, that's probably what happens here if Russ even does force his hand. I don't think he's desperate to get out of Seattle. So I do think Russ is back. I don't think it's impossible that he gets traded. Just to me, it seems like 80+% chance he'll be back in Seattle. So if that's the case, I look at that list of free agents there, and you gotta get a lot of these guys back. You got $36 million in cap space to do it. So that's my priority number 1 is bringing some of these guys back. So I would try to work something out with Dwayne Brown first. He's 36 years old. He wants a big contract. I don't know if he's going to get what he's asking for, and it could be a situation where he hits the market, finds out it's not as big as he would hope, and then maybe he can return to Seattle 2 years, maybe $35 million, something like that, good amount guaranteed. You can't let this offensive line get worse, and there are not immediate solutions for the Seahawks to really improve a tackle. You can dream and say, oh, but we're going to go and recruit Teron Armstead or whatever, who's like the, everybody wants Teron Armstead. Only one team's going to be able to win out on that. So likely Dwayne Brown's going to be the best you can do at left tackle. So that to me is really priority one. Ethan Pocic, I think you can afford to let him go, at least let him test the market. He's a low-end starter, really has developed slowly. So I'm not so much worried about him. But after Dwayne Brown, I would talk to Rashad Penny and get him back. I don't think his market's going to be huge because the last 6 weeks of the season is really the only time he's consistently played well in the NFL. He is a running back. He is 26 years old with a huge list of injury concerns. I think you can get Rashad Penny back for like 1 year, $4 million, something like what Leonard Fournette got for the Bucs last year. I think that's a really good move for them because they do run this Shanahan wide zone offense, and he's proved to be a great fit in that offense. So you go Dwayne Brown, Rashad Penny. I think you could make a decision on these two tight ends between Will Dissly and Gerald Everett. Those are two good players that know your system. Everett didn't really work out in year one with the Seahawks. Dissly has been a good player for them, just is a little bit capped with his speed and how much separation he can create as a receiver, but a really good run blocker. I think you make a decision to bring one of those two guys back for cheap, and then you just kind of let the rest trickle into free agency. Defensively, I think getting Al Woods back for cheap would make sense. I put him on there for a reason. They're pretty thin on the interior. He's a good defensive nose tackle, but he'd be cheap. He'd be $1 or $2 million. I look at this secondary: DJ Reed, Quandre Diggs, Sidney Jones. I want all three of those guys back. I'm especially excited about how the development of DJ Reed over the last 2 years, kicking outside after being this kind of safety slot corner guy that the NFL 2 or 3 years ago looked at him at 5'9" and said, "Oh, sorry, you're an overhang defender. You're a safety." Well, the NFL's changed now. The times have caught up. Even the Seahawks are like the most prime example of that. And it's to be a bit of a tangent here. It's something I've talked about. It's ironic. The Legion of Boom defense just spread these 6'2", lengthy press cover three corners around the league, and everybody was looking for that. Because of that, offenses evolved into the Kyle Shanahan offense that is systematically designed to attack cover three with deep crossing routes that put the middle safety in a bind and force him to be wrong either way. So the adjustment to that is off cover four Vic Fangio style defense that is now spreading around the league. And in those systems, your cornerbacks aren't pressing as much, which means you can get away with having a DJ Reed or a Darius Williams for the Rams, something like that. It's very ironic that here are the Seahawks now bringing over Sean Desai, who is a Vic Fangio disciple, to potentially take over as head coach with a Vic Fangio-style defense for Pete Carroll, who started this whole thing to begin with. So I find that so fascinating as a football geek. But back to DJ Reed, he's a great fit in this system that's going to run a lot more quarters coverage this year. So get him back. I think Sidney Jones has shown when healthy he can be a good number 2 corner. And Quandre Diggs provides all of that versatility as a former slot corner. How many times on this channel have I talked about in a quarters heavy system, you want versatile safeties, oftentimes with cornerback experience, that can come into the box from a disguised look, come in and run man coverage, run a buzz zone, but also be able to convert your quarters coverages into man quickly and cover corner routes, cover deep posts, have some speed and range at the top. So he's a great fit for that system. And that's most of your cap space, right? Dwayne Brown, Rashad Penny, one of your tight ends, and try to get those 3 guys back in your secondary. You're spending probably around $40 to $50 million in cap space this year to do that. So they're not going to be swimming in cap space after that. I did mention you got to bump that number up a little bit because a lot of these re-signings, they're going to be pushing cap into the future by using void years and all this stuff so that they can spend a little bit in free agency. But that's really your priority if you're the Seahawks. I think, is get your key players back, bring Russ back. You're not that far away. And then you can look to free agency with maybe $15, $20 million to make a couple moves to improve where you really need it. So where do they really need it? Interior offensive line, center and guard, and pass rush, particularly interior pass rush. So I don't think they're going to spend huge, but one guy that would be really fascinating for pass rush help is Zadarius Smith, who I do think ultimately gets released by the Green Bay Packers because I don't think any team can really afford to trade for his contract in the situation that it's in. If they can make it work financially, he would be that upgrade to the pass rush that they really need. They have some young pieces out there, but none of them are even proven number 2 starters, let alone proven number 1. I think if you could get Zadarius Smith off the block or off the street, that would be a huge upgrade for them. Otherwise, there's some more like interior rusher types that I think would really benefit next to Poona Ford there on the inside. Akeem Hicks could be available for cheap, someone that Sean Desai is familiar with, or Diassi, Sean Desai, it's one of the two. But Akeem Hicks would be a spark plug of an interior rusher, does have injury concerns, but would be a nice signing. Emmanuel Ogbah could be interesting as a 3-4 defensive end for them, which I do expect them to run a lot of 3-4 next year. Larry Ogunjobi for the Cincinnati Bengals coming off of injury. Really poor run defender, but is a good pass rushing interior guy and could be a nice fit in there. And if you wanted to go more on the edge, Seattle, Pete Carroll, they have traditionally liked bigger bodied guys. Derek Barnett for the Philadelphia Eagles is an impending free agent and could be a fit as well. So those are just some names you could target, maybe find some value in free agency. Also on the interior offensive line, signing linemen in free agency is never easy. They are always the highest demand. You know, when you talk about like mock draft season and stuff, and you know, basically if you don't if you reach on an offensive lineman in the draft for these guys in these mock drafts, so many fans come out and they're like, why would we reach on a tackle when we can just sign Brandon Scherf in free agency? We can just sign Teron Armstead in free agency. It's not that easy. There's like 20 teams lining up to sign these guys. So signing linemen in free agency always is a dream in any fan's head, but these guys fly off the market. So it's easier said than done, but some of the names they could target are like starting caliber players that would be good scheme fits. James Daniels from the Chicago Bears has not been re-signed yet, although I expect them to probably re-sign him. Connor Williams for the Cowboys, he probably will hit the market. Billy Turner's another guy that might be a cap casualty for the Green Bay Packers. Could be a guard or a tackle for them. Very familiar with that system. Mark Glowinski, who I think actually started his career in Seattle, a good athlete, could run that system well. Laken Tomlinson would be a little bit more expensive, and I don't know. I think the Niners will probably keep him. But again, he could be an option. And then Ben Jones, center from Tennessee. Tennessee could be running into some cap issues. Ben Jones, getting up there in age, could be a Band-Aid at center. So that's really your kind of like free agent look for the team. And then as you look ahead to the draft, this team doesn't have a first-round pick. So I do think looking at like offensive line on day 2 would be smart. So some guys you might be able to target there, like Dylan Parham out of Memphis. He's a really athletic center who could come in and beef up that run blocking game right away. Alec Lindstrom, same deal out of Boston College. He's the brother of Chris Lindstrom, really good guard for the Falcons. Or say Max Mitchell is out of UL Lafayette, probably a 3rd-round pick for him at right tackle. Could also play guard. He's a good run blocker, decent technique, not the strongest guy in the world. He's kind of like a poor man's Mike McGlinchey in my eyes, so that's kind of where I see a fit there. This tackle class, we're going to be talking about it more as we lead up to the draft, but it's been pretty disappointing from what I've seen so far. But there's just a few names on the offensive line you could target, and Yeah, there's your Seattle Seahawks offseason. It's keep Russ. It's retain the critical players we talked about, Dwayne Brown, Rashad Penny, those players in the secondary, and maybe find a value signing on offensive line or interior pass rush, and then you draft. It's not a crazy offseason for the Seahawks, but it is a very, very important one if they're going to compete next year with Russell Wilson. All right, then we have the Arizona Cardinals next up. And this is much more complicated than the Seahawks because the Cardinals have $2.7 million in cap space. They have a lot of older players on their team and a lot of impending free agents. So here's their list of free agents with $2.7 million in cap space. Both running backs, Chase Edmonds and James Conner. Okay, whatever. Zach Ertz is an impending free agent who they traded for, who actually was a key contributor to that offense. Christian Kirk, wide receiver. AJ Green, also an impending free agent. And Max Garcia, who doesn't sound like much, but he did start a lot of games for the Cardinals. So those are starting reps that they would have to find a replacement. And unfortunately, Josh Jones was, a third-round pick several years ago. Doesn't look like he's ready to fill in that void. So it doesn't sound like much losing a Max Garcia there. But finding even just replacement level starters on the offensive line is not always easy, especially when you only have $2.7 million in cap space. So he's going to be gone. And then on the defense, most of their guys are mostly in place, except for Chandler Jones, which complicates this entire thing because he is someone that wants a lot of money, and he's been very vocal about that. And he's a player that I don't personally think is worth what he thinks he's worth. So it makes it a really tough call because on one hand, he's a really good player at a key position, rushing off the edge there. But on the other hand, it's like you got $2.7 million in cap space and a lot of holes on this team to fix. You can't commit all of your resources this offseason to giving Chandler Jones a 3-year, $70 million contract or whatever it is he's going to want, especially because he's a guy that's, in my opinion, been regressing as his career has gone on here, as most people's do. But, he had that huge week 1 game against Tennessee, turned it on a little bit late. But, man, I don't think Chandler Jones is a $20+ million pass rusher, especially if there's other options out there at half the price. So he makes things really difficult. But anyway, back to kind of my step 1 of what I would do for the Arizona Cardinals, and that is make these tough calls. So the players that I'm letting walk are AJ Green, Christian Kirk, and Chase Edmonds. Those guys are no-brainers. Kirk, you just can't afford. He's probably going to fetch $8+ million from someone just because he's got some good tape on there, and I think in a better system that knows how to utilize him in the slot, where the Cardinals kind of struggle to utilize him, I think he's going to demand some money. Chase Edmonds, someone will be stupid enough to pay a running back more money than the Cardinals can afford him. And AJ Green just isn't healthy for this offense at this point anymore, someone that just can't really separate. So those guys you easily let go. And then what I'm doing is looking at that $2.7 million in cap space and saying, how can we move money around to keep Zach Ertz, Chandler Jones, and James Conner actually is someone that I think would make sense to bring back here. But I'm not rushing to the bargaining table to sign any of these guys. If they're stubborn and they want to test the market and make a ton of money, I don't think the Cardinals are in a great situation to overpay these guys. Ertz and Chandler Jones they're getting up there in age. You don't want to commit to 2024 Chandler Jones, 2024 Zach Ertz. I like how they might look next year, but if they're stubborn, I would let them test the market. Now, if they're very happy and they want to stay for kind of team discounts, I would do it. I would sign them. I would do void years on them so that you can get them under the cap for this season. And then James Conner is probably a situation where he tests the market, finds out no one really wants to pay him that much, and he wants to return to Arizona, where I think he's pretty happy for maybe a little bit less. But I think those 3 guys are players that you want to focus on getting back for cheap. But I'm willing to let all these guys go, to be completely honest. last year's team was a pretty special assembly of talent. And they're in a tough spot here where, yes, you have Kyler on that rookie contract, but that's coming up. You're going to have to pay him. I don't think you want to just drown yourself in void years on guys like Chandler Jones and Ertz and all these guys and the other players that you would have to add void years to in order to retain this talent. So I do think you want to be careful because, look, Kyler's like 24 years old. Like, you don't have to go all in right now. This isn't the Rams with Stafford or the Bucks with Brady or the Packers with Rodgers. I like being aggressive. I always will like being aggressive. But there's certain times when the window is right. And I don't think right now, with the Rams in the situation they're in, with the Niners set up really well next year, even the Seahawks, I think, are in a position to have a pretty good team next year. I don't think you want to completely screw yourself for the future. So I do think you want to be careful. I'm not saying like let all these guys go and just rebuild. That's not what I'm saying. But they're in a really sticky situation. They're going to have to make some tough calls. So the guys I'm focusing on are Zach Ertz, Chandler Jones, and James Conner, but only at the right price. And then if you can finagle some free agents, you've got to find value, right? You've only got the $2.7 million there, but I will say you can find value where their needs are, at interior defensive line and corner especially. So here's some names that I think they could really be interested in that would be huge additions for their team. Tim Settle is someone I'm going to talk a lot about this offseason, a player in Washington that's a really good run defender that's been stashed kind of on a deep depth chart. He could be a player that could come in and start day one as your Corey Peters replacement as a nose. There's some veteran options like Akeem Hicks, Ndamukong Suh, Daquan Jones, Austin Johnson. These are all very physical guys up front that can improve this run defense that was so bad last year. So those are some areas I think they can find some value. Basically, that same list of offensive linemen I had for the Seahawks applies to the Cardinals. James Daniels, Connor Williams, Billy Turner, Mark Lewinsky, Laken Tomlinson. Those could be cheaper additions. Unlikely to be cheaper, but one of these guys might sneak through the cracks and maybe you can get them for $4 or $5 million. Sometimes that happens. So it's just about finding value at their areas of needs. Also, cornerback, I didn't even mention. That's especially a position where you can find value later in free agency. Here's a couple names that would really fit for the Cardinals. Rasul Douglas, Kyle Fuller, Darius Williams, Desmond King, Casey Hayward. Maybe the Seahawks let Sidney Jones go. There's going to be players that could come in and start as your cornerback too for them that I think they'd be really smart to target. Next up, we have the draft for the Cardinals. And it's a huge draft for them because, let's face it, their drafts have not been very good over the last 5 years. They really haven't. If you just look, not just the first round, but you look into like second, third, fourth round, they've had a hard time finding young talent. And I mentioned the kind of weird window that the Cardinals are in. They got to have a good draft this year. They really do, because you can't just build this team with Kyler Murray and a bunch of 87-year-old veterans. Like, that's just not a sustainable way. So this is a huge draft for the Cardinals. They have all their picks. A couple names that I would suggest. First round, Zion Johnson. It's going to be a very popular mock draft for them. To get a 6'3" guard up in front of Kyler would be such a boost because it would help him see the field. So Zion Johnson is ascending up boards. Boston College stud. Second round, I think I'd be a good spot for a corner where you're looking at maybe like Josh Jobe out of Alabama, Kyler Gordon out of Washington. Could be some names to think about there. And then in the third round, I think getting an edge rusher there with J.J. Watt and maybe Chandler Jones coming back. Get a younger guy with some upside. I like Boye Mafe maybe in that range out of Minnesota. Maybe Kingsley Enagbare out of South Carolina could be there. So just it's a deeper edge group. I think second, third round could be a situation where they can hit on like a long-term starter at edge, which is it's just something that they haven't been able to do, right? They've whiffed on a bunch of guys in the draft. So they've got to have a good draft this year to start getting a younger core for Kyler Murray moving forward. So a very complicated offseason for the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to be kind of caught in between of like trying to bring back this team with the most value they can, but also being very conscious of the future and saying, okay, this window with Kyler's rookie contract is closing fast. We need to get some cheaper rookie contracts in there. So the draft is very important for doing that. And now our next team is the San Francisco 49ers, who have the most straightforward offseason out of anybody here. And let me just have a little water before we get into the San Francisco. All right. So, actually, I'm going to pause the podcast, just take a quick break, clear my throat for a second, because I'm already getting raspy. I mentioned the cold seeping in here from Minnesota. So give me like 30 seconds, take a quick break, and then we'll whip back in here with the NFC West. All right, we are back. We just got a super chat from Autumn during the break there. So I can answer that right now, not a bad time. If the Bengals address O-line in free agency, do you think there's a chance Devontae Wyatt makes it to 31? I really want him in stripes. Yeah, I think Wyatt, Georgia defensive tackle, right? He's going to be in that 25 to 50 range. I think there's a pretty good chance he's there. Now, I am thinking of the right guy, right? Devontae Wyatt is, yeah. Now, I don't know if you necessarily need him. You got B.J. Hill. You got DJ Reader. I don't know. I don't know if you necessarily need him. I think cornerback and offensive line are still going to be massive needs. I mean, the Bengals aren't going to fix their entire offensive line in free agency. So I don't know if I was a Bengals fan, I don't know if I'd be hoping for a defensive tackle. I think that's a pretty good position group for them. But he probably will be available. All right, back into the NFC West. I was kind of starting to say the Niners have the most easy landscape here for their offseason because they only have $2.9 million in cap space. They have a phenomenal roster, and they have a few key free agents to kind of focus on. So, you got that $2.9 million in cap space. I just think it makes a ton of sense to, I need to rewind. I need to rewind for a second because Jimmy Garoppolo is the big question mark here. And as I said, $2.9 million in cap space. They're going to clear a bunch of that when they trade Jimmy G. I don't have the exact numbers, but it's going to be in I think it's like 20 plus million that they'll free. So they'll actually be sitting towards more like the top half in cap space available after that move. But they do have some big name, not necessarily big name, but key free agents hitting the market. So Laken Tomlinson, Here's their list of free agents: Laken Tomlinson, Tom Compton, DJ Jones, Arden Key, Jaquiski Tart, and K'Wan Williams. So there's, to me, three key players on that list. Laken Tomlinson, who was one of the better run-blocking guards in the NFL last year. DJ Jones, who's a key cog as a interior run defender for them. He's a big piece for them because he allows guys like Eric Armstead to exist closer to the inside of the defensive line. A lot of their interior guys are more undersized players. And Javon Kinlaw is a really rough run defender. He is not good in that part of the game as he comes back. So to get DJ Jones in there as that tone setter up front that can, play as a shade on the center or be your bare defense nose tackle sometimes, I do think he's really important. And he's not going to be super expensive, but he's not going to be for free either. He's probably going to cost like $5 million or so. So between him and Laken Tomlinson, you're probably spending about $15 million on those two guys. So that leaves you with about $7 million in cap space. Again, after you trade Jimmy Garoppolo, you can always move some contracts around. But if you don't have to, it's preferred because then you're not pushing money into the future. But another big guy there is K'Wan Williams, who really impressed me. Like, I need a better word, and it's not coming to me right now, but like, he was critical for that deep playoff run. The last 4 weeks of the season, when that defense really came on into the playoffs, the defense that they played against the Cowboys and the Packers, K'Wan Williams, I did that film breakdown of the Niners defense against the Packers. He is so critical for that defense. He is instinctive. He allows them to be a little bit lighter up front because he's so good at stopping the run. He's a big reason the Packers couldn't get the run game going, and he shuts down the slot. At the same time, he is a hell of a player. So he's important. The Niners also have some guys coming up for free agency. Debo needs to be paid, and Nick Bosa's probably going to want his money pretty soon. Like, he's just so good to have him on a rookie contract. I think at some point he's going to be like, can you guys just pay me already? You've also got, I feel like there's someone else that they need to pay. I mean, McGlinchey's coming up. Like, they have free agents coming up. So I just don't think you want to blow out in free agency if you're the Niners. I think those three guys I mentioned, Laken Tomlinson, K'Wan Williams, and DJ Jones, get them back. You can push a little bit into the future, trade Jimmy Garoppolo, and honestly, start looking at the draft because I just don't think they need to spend much in free agency, and you want to have some money in your back pocket to pay guys like Deebo Samuel. So as far as the draft goes for them, some positions of need and prospects that they could look at include interior offensive line, that right guard center situation, and if you can't keep Laken Tomlinson, that's going to become a need. They did draft Aaron Banks in the second round last year. I have no idea why. Stack Bundles just said Dre Greenlaw is an impending free agency. Yes, absolutely. Another player they need to pay, but interior offensive line. It's going to become a need, if not this year, very quickly, because you have Alex Mack at center. Did a good job last year, maybe has one more year in him, but he's getting up there in age. And then right guard, Daniel Brunskill, another guy that's, do you keep him? Do you let him go? He's just kind of this replacement level guy right now. So interior offensive line, you could look at a guy like Ed Ingram out of LSU, maybe in the third round, Alec Lindstrom out of Boston College, Dylan Parham, all good options for them. All three guys could play center, I think. You also could really use another cornerback here on the outside. You've got Mosley, you've got Ambry Thomas, you've got K'Wan Williams. I think, third round or even second round to add a fourth piece in there to add dime flexibility and to add depth for injury would be really important. So guys like Roger McCreary, Kyler Gordon, Darion Kendrick, even a Tariq Castro Fields, who I really like, maybe in like the third round. And then strong safety as well. You're letting Jaquiski Tart go. I don't think it's a dire situation. I kind of liked what I saw from Talanoa Hufanga. I think he could play there. You could draft a guy like Jalen Petrie, Lewis Kine. I don't know how to say his last name. I haven't done his eval yet. Kirby Joseph, Bubba Bolden. Some good safeties there in that day 2 range that maybe they could look at as a Jaquiski Tart replacement, who I don't think is a critical player to re-sign for them. Not even so much because he dropped the interception in basically cost them a trip to the Super Bowl. I think he's fine, but someone else will probably pay him more than you need to. So there's the Niners. Pretty basic offseason, right? Trade Jimmy, get a second, third round pick for him, whatever someone's willing to pay, and then re-sign Laken Tomlinson, K'Wan Williams, DJ Jones, and start looking at the draft. And they're going to be in a really good position next year to have some talent around Trey Lance. I see a couple of you guys' super chat questions coming in. I will get to you. I just want to do the Rams here first, and then we will get right into the mailbag after that. So the LA Rams, congratulations, Rams fans, on your Super Bowl championship. And now it's a shit show. Negative $10 million in cap space. No first or second round pick. They do have a third round pick, but I think it's just a compensatory pick that's like basically a fourth round pick. So the draft, not much of an option for you. Free agency, not much of an option. And your impending free agents are Andrew Whitworth, who's probably going to retire, not a free agent. He is under contract, but expected retirement for Andrew Whitworth. Odell Beckham, Brian Allen, their starting center. Austin Corbett, their starting right guard. Sebastian Joseph Day, a really important run defender for them. Von Miller, of course. And Darius Williams, their number 2 corner. Significant players set to hit free agency for them with negative $10 million in cap space. So they're in a very difficult situation. You also have Aaron Donald likely wanting to become the highest paid defender in the league. Now, it might actually be a situation where they can create more cap space with a contract extension, but it's something you need to think about. You need to distribute more money to Aaron Donald somewhere. So they're going to be busy trying to retain talent, trying to clear cap space. I don't think free agency is going to be a word that gets muttered in that building this year. It's just not something that's going to be available to them. I think they're going to be able to resign some of these guys. The cap space is it's not real. We've seen it time and time again, especially when it comes to restructuring and re-signing your own players. You can really get creative with this stuff, and the Rams have done it, and I think will do it to try and be a championship caliber team again next year. So my priorities here are going to be Odell Beckham and Austin Corbett. I think those are critical pieces for that offense to remain a championship caliber offense next year. Austin Corbett being the most important one. Really good right guard. He has developed, or does he play left? No, he plays right. Brian Edwards is left. But he's a really good right guard. I think someone would be willing to pay Austin Corbett north of $8 million a year, and I think the Rams will have to pay him that much. If you're going to lose Brian Allen, which I think is certainly possible, I think keeping a really good right guard there that knows your system is going to be a really important thing for them to do. So Austin Corbett is already putting you further in the hole as far as their negative $10 million in cap space. And then I think Odell Beckham comes back here on a 1-year deal that's a lot cheaper than people realize. It's not going to be what he signed here originally, It might not even be the Juju Smith-Schuster contract that was like 1 year, $6 million, but it might be like 1 year, $10 million to just kind of play in a role that's really good for him, running those backside digs, playing with a really good quarterback, Matthew Stafford, that loves throwing him the ball. And the beauty is you get Robert Woods back to draw even more attention away from him. So, the Rams love like trips formations, right? They love 11 personnel. And what they love to do is basically, it's way deeper than this. But what they do with Odell Beckham is they put him on the ISO side. And he can run go balls and he can run deep digs. So while zone coverages and man coverages are all distracted with what's going on over here, which next year is going to be with Higbee, Robert Woods, and obviously Cooper Kupp running those option routes over the middle, over on the backside is Odell Beckham, who's either getting one-on-one on the outside or running that deep dig that Stafford can always look back to when it's cover 3 or cover 4. And he's like a perfect fit for that role. So he can come right back in there and dominate. And then obviously with the torn ACL, he's not going to be able to play right away. He's probably not going to be able to play till like November or even maybe December, but the Rams are going to be just fine without him, I think. So he comes back, he gets paid, and then balls out, and at 29 years old can then hit the market again and get paid like generational wealth. That, you know, he's made a lot of money in his career, but he could make like another $60+ million if he comes back to the right situation and balls out. So I think Corbett, Odell Beckham should be their priorities. I think they do retain those two players, but you're going to be losing Brian Allen, Sebastian Joseph Day. Von Miller's interesting. I don't know what kind of money he's going to ask for. I wouldn't be stunned if Von Miller's like, look, I've made enough money. I'm happy here in LA. I'll come back for, 2 years, 20 mil, and just kick all the money into the future and just ball out. I wouldn't be stunned if that happens, but I don't think the Rams would be even smart to pay him like over $20 million if he wants to get another big contract now that he's won another ring. Like, he's got 2 rings. It's not like he needs to ring chase or anything. So he's interesting. I think Darius Williams is as good as gone. He didn't have as good of a year without Brandon Staley's defense there. So they're going to be busy trying to retain their top talent, trying to get over the cap. Free agency to me is just not going to be an option for the Rams. And then you got to look at the draft, and they have a couple mid-round picks. Interior offensive line is going to be a need for them. Interior defensive line is going to be a need for them. I think edge, looking down the road, is going to be a need for them. Cornerback, safety. Repeating for the Rams is going to be tough. I don't think it's impossible, but they went in for this year, and they got their ring. They're going to try and squeeze what they can out of this thing, but without spoiling too much, I don't think I will see the Rams as the best team in the NFC West heading into next season, most likely. Could change. They could surprise with everything they're able to pull off, but it's all about retention. They've got the talent. It's all about retention for the Rams. And there's fixing the NFC West. I really hope you guys enjoyed it and were able to follow it. Please leave your comments in the actual video portion when this is all done. I won't be going back to read the live chat, but leave your comments how I can how I can improve the format of this. It's my first time doing it, so just let me know if it was good or if there's things I could do to improve it. But I'm going to take another quick break because my voice is breaking down again, and then get into the Patreon mailbag, answer some of your super chat questions here live. So I will be right back. So now it is time to get into the Patreon mailbag as well as the live chat, super chat mailbag. Again, you can sign up on Patreon, support this channel, gain access to exclusive draft content, and the ability to submit questions to this show, patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy. And we got a couple live chat questions to answer already. So from Matt, where's the landing spot for Jimmy G? Do I see him bringing in a second or a third? I think Washington and Pittsburgh are the two favorites, in my opinion. West Coast offenses, quick-hitting passing games at the core of it with Canada and Turner. And just situations where you don't need necessarily elite quarterback play. You just need good quarterback play or solid average quarterback play to maybe make it work next year. So those are the two landing spots. I think Pittsburgh's second would probably do it. Washington, that's a top 50 pick. Historically, there's a big drop-off after the 50th pick. So maybe you're talking about like a third, fifth round, or a third round pick, or like a second round pick swap with a fourth round pick or something like that. I don't know if Washington would be willing to give up their second for him. Maybe they would, but the reports of him going for a first round pick are just obscene. I can't imagine that being the case. And then from Mike, assuming the Bears go Armstead at left tackle in free agency, again, you can't assume that. There's going to be about 15 teams lining up to give the bag to Teron Armstead. But, okay, let's assume they can land him. Who would be the best X receiver they could bring in the second? Should they trade back for Pickens or Ross? Okay, so I haven't done my receiver evaluations yet, so I can't really answer that with confidence right now. It sounds like the Purdue kid is gaining a lot of second-round steam. I haven't done his eval yet, but what is it, David Bell? Is that his name? Yeah, David Bell, John Mechie, Pickens, Ross. Like, that's probably your cluster there. Maybe Jamison Williams falls because of the ACL. It's possible, but yeah, I think Bell, Mechie, Pickens, Ross, I feel like will be there. I don't see Justin Ross going before the Bears pick in the second round. All right, so those were some super chat questions. Now, the Patreon questions. Let me pull it up here. 1 second. All right, I have 32 questions. I don't know if I'll get through all these or not. I guess it depends how many super chat questions we get as we're going here. But let's get started. From Azana, under Wink Martindale, the Ravens' attacking 3-4 scheme has been a top-tier defense year in, year out. All things considered, I was caught off guard when they let him go, considering how well he performed as the defensive coordinator. My expectations for Mike McDonald, who was the defensive coordinator for Michigan this past year, are extremely high. One silver lining that has me excited is his progress developing Aiden Hutchinson. He went from a day 2 prospect to the favorite for the number 1 overall pick, hoping that Odafe Owe can have a similar result. What should I expect schematically from the Ravens defense? I'm not a huge college football guy. I'm not going to act like an expert on McDaniel's defense. I'm certainly excited to see what he does. I imagine they're going to stay pretty damn multiple. They've always preferred 3-4 defense there, and I can't imagine they get off of that. And I know they, at Michigan, just having watched Hutchinson, they seem to be pretty multiple up front. So I don't know a whole lot about them. I expect a multiple front, maybe a little bit less blitz happy than they were, because it's hard to be more blitz happy than they were with Wink Martindale. I don't have a great answer for why they changed. I don't think it's as simple as Joe Burrow's really good against the blitz, so they had to change their defense, but I think that maybe played a factor. It's the biggest takeaway from that hire for me is that Jim's not going to refer a bad coordinator to John, right? And he sure as hell is not going to tell John to fire Wink Martindale if he doesn't think McDaniel's a total stud. So that's my biggest takeaway, is that he has that inside connection. And I think you can be pretty optimistic that the Ravens are going to get that right, because they're the Baltimore Ravens. They play defense. It's just what they do. They know defense. So if they see a coach that's good enough to fire a top 10 defensive coordinator for him, there's probably something pretty special about him. So I'm really excited to see what he does. I wouldn't be too worried about it as a Ravens fan, but I'm also not going to act like I'm a genius or an expert on the Michigan Wolverines schematics. So there you go. From Matt Sierra, can you explain the difference between left and right tackle? Same thing with left and right end. How come some guys are good on one side but not on the other? Well, that second part is just, I don't know, genetics, preference. Some guys just prefer one side. And most, I would say the majority of linemen can go both ways, but some players just, it doesn't compute when they switch sides. We've seen that. It's rare, but you can't just count on a guy always switching from left to right and being good at it. As far as the difference between left and right, traditionally left tackles are deemed more valuable because it's the quarterback's blind side, right? You're turning your back to the left side of your offensive line. Every quarterback that's not Tua is a right-handed quarterback. It's easier to see pressure when you're facing it, so you don't want your left tackle losing, because that's how you get strip sacks and stuff. So left tackle has typically been viewed more valuable. Now, you still want a good right tackle, right? Pressure is pressure. It just is better if you can see it coming, which typically the right side pressure you can. And then defensive end, it's almost a reaction to that, because most teams' best pass protector is their left tackle. So most teams put their best pass rusher at the opposite end to take advantage of, in theory, a worse protector. Now, left end, right end, it's very scheme dependent, team dependent. Some teams will just move these guys all around. Some teams will pick a specific matchup, because like the Bucs, for example, their best pass protector is their right tackle. So you might just take them and put them on the other side. But yeah, there's a little rundown on your question there. From Nicholas Craig, if you could be a part of a team staff, what one would you prefer to be? Head coach, GM, OC, DC, etc. I would like to be the owner, because it's my ship. I can't get fired if I screw up, and I can do whatever I want. Pretty easy answer there. I would much rather be the owner than the GM, because I can be both, right? I never fault these owners when they overstep their boundaries. Like a Jerry Jones. Like, yeah, it's frustrating as a fan if he's not very good at it, but like, if I had that much money, I'm doing the same freaking thing. Like, you better believe it. Like, I'm buying a football team and making all the decisions. Everyone else can kick rocks. Like, yeah, that's what I would do. From Rory, could you give your top 5 landing spots for Aaron Rodgers if he leaves the Packers? So I actually did some prep for the mailbag this time. I've got my answers here. I couldn't come up with 5 landing spots. I only have 4. So I got Denver, of course, number 1. It's been beaten to the dirt. I think if he leaves Green Bay, it's Denver. Like, in my mind, even considering anywhere else is just a waste of time. Seriously. Like, Denver is the team that's like, we'll give you everything we got draft pick-wise for Aaron Rodgers. Tampa Bay was the second team on my list, and that's very contingent on, like, their own kind of offseason madness. Like, is Godwin back? Is Gronk back? Is the offensive line back? Like, they have so many impending free agents there for Tampa. That team might just fall apart. I don't know. But Tampa would be second. Washington is third, just like team-wise. I don't think Aaron Rodgers has any remote interest in going to play for the Washington Commanders. I think he would just rather retire. But if you want to talk theory, it'd be a good spot for him. I think that defense can be much better next year. They've got an offensive line. They got Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Diami Brown. it'd be a good, like, they could be a Super Bowl team with Aaron Rodgers. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers were the fourth team just because they got a defense, and I think it's a prestigious team, good playmakers, like that'd be the fourth team. That's about it. Maybe New Orleans could have been the fifth. Let's just say New Orleans is the fifth, but I don't even know how they would make that work with their cap situation. Okay, next question from Mr. Irrelevant. We got a Tom Brady question here. So Brady finally retired. How many Super Bowls do you think he would have won if he had Mahomes' arm and athleticism for his whole career? So you're saying he's still Tom Brady, same like FU mentality, work ethic, ability to see the game, but he can run and has a rocket arm? So he's at this point the absolute clear-cut, like, best quarterback of all time. I mean, the thing is, like, how many years were there that he could have won a Super Bowl that he didn't? You know, it feels like, you know, you look back at like Breeze, Rodgers, like all these quarterbacks, like there's a bunch of years that was a year that they could have won a Super Bowl and it just didn't happen for them. It feels like Brady, the answer was always yes. They ended up winning for whatever reason. So I don't know how many more years he would have had a Super Bowl team around him. Maybe he gets one more, but I don't think that number changes too much, to be honest. But that would be incredible. It'd be like watching Aaron Rodgers play football or something. From Nathan, delirious right now as a Bengals fan. This came in before the Super Bowl, by the way. Do you think the job that the Bengals defense did on Mahomes in the second half is one of the best second half adjustments any unit has ever done, especially in the postseason? It was incredibly impressive. I'm going to cite Louis Riddick, who had a great tweet. He said, "No, everything we see in sports that's amazing is not the greatest thing of all time in that department." It was incredible. I'm not going to go and say it was the best second half coaching job ever, but it was fantastic. Like, I haven't watched the All-22 to tell you exactly what they did, but they seem to be passing off those deep crossers really well, dropping 8 into coverage, and just I think the game plan was great, but the execution was even better. Like, they were able to contain Mahomes, and the coverage was awesome in the second half of that game. So, tip of the cap to Lou Anarumo, who's going to be a top-tier head coach candidate heading into next year. If he repeats with that defense, he will very likely be a head coach in 2023. From July, how would you rate the Rams' addition of Von Miller and OBJ based on like my expectations when they happened versus how they played out? I think OBJ exceeded my expectations a little bit. A big part of that was the Robert Woods injury. Like, OBJ really became a feature of that offense, which I didn't think was going to happen. I think Robert Woods getting injured led to a expedited development of his role. Von Miller, I think, was pretty much what I expected. I thought that was going to be a move that really helped them in the playoffs, not so much in the regular season, because he wasn't playing that well for Denver. I feel like you could kind of tell, like, he was just kind of coasting. And I think he was coasting a little bit when he first got to the Rams. But I think when he got there, he got really back into shape. And by the time the playoffs hit, he was pretty much peak Von Miller again. So it didn't really surprise me that that's how it played out. I feel like a lot of veterans kind of save a little bit of juice for the playoffs. From Nick, I don't think I'm going to get through all these mailbags, guys. My voice is just leaving me. I'll probably end up doing an audio. I have so many mailbag questions. I want to get through them. I'll probably end up doing another shorter audio-only version of this podcast that won't be up on YouTube. So make sure you guys go and subscribe or follow the Fully Inflated Football Podcast on Spotify or iTunes, wherever you get your podcast, because I'll probably finish up these mailbag questions there tomorrow. But I'll do a couple more. do any last super chats that come in here. But who can chuck the ball further from Nick? Josh Allen or Jamarcus Russell? My gut tells me Josh Allen, but I don't remember too much about Jamarcus Russell's arm talent. Everything I've heard is that it was unworldly. I hold the opinion that Josh Allen has the best, strongest arm that the NFL has ever seen. So I'm going to hold to that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jamarcus Russell had a better arm, surely. From Keyz, with the way that Joe Burrow has played this season and the offseason, is there an argument to be made that Joe Burrow should win MVP and not Aaron Rodgers? No, because it is and always will be a regular season award because of the way they've always voted for it. I think by the end of the year, everyone kind of agreed, like, if you include postseason, that would have hurt Aaron Rodgers' MVP case significantly, and Joe Burrow's would have been helped. So if they included postseason, yes, but they don't. They vote before the playoffs even start. So, hang on, we got a asshole in the chat here. How do I kick this dick out of here? Okay, I think we got it. All right. It's the one downside of not having a producer here. From Honk Boy, why does Trent Baalke still have a job and can you fire an owner? No, to allude back to my last question, you cannot fire an owner. It's an ownership situation. He's lazy. I don't want to call him stupid, but when it comes to running a football team, he is too loyal to Trent Baalke, who just, I think it's maybe a little bit overstated how bad he is. Like, Jags fans hate this guy with a burning passion. I think he's bad. I don't think he's like, the worst front office personnel guy ever. But it's a example of loyalty and just weird, like, lackadaisical ownership. Like, a more passionate owner would want to get the best personnel guys that they could have, right? And Baalke just, he hasn't earned his position over the last decade. So he shouldn't be there, but to me it's a Shad Khan situation, not so much something to be mad at Baalke about. We just got a super chat question from Riley. What did the Panthers do about their O-line? Well, again, I will be doing a more in-depth Panthers offseason thing whenever I get to the NFC South of these team offseason rebuild things. But you do everything you possibly can, right? Just look at the list of best offensive line free agents, call all of their agents, and scout all of these offensive linemen in this draft and scout them again. You have a bottom three offensive line, pretty good roster everywhere else, other than quarterback, and go attack it. That's all you can really do with an offensive line that bad, is target the best offensive lineman, keep going down your list until you fill out your team, and then double down in the draft. I feel like my voice all of a sudden came back to me, but I've already promoted the audio podcast. Let's get halfway through my pre-saved. So this is the 11th question. We'll get to the 16th question, and then we'll stop there. Okay. From Luke, my friend thinks Christian Harris to the Seahawks in the second round is a great pick. This seems like an awful pick to me, as the Seahawks have much bigger needs than linebacker. God, we got another asshat in the chat. What is wrong with people? Get out of here. Probably some stupid 13-year-old that thinks he's funny. Anyway. Christian Harris to the Seahawks in the second round. I don't think it'd be the worst pick in the world. I wouldn't do it. I don't think it'd be a good pick. It'd be like a, C- pick for me because I think just get offensive line, get a better pass rush. You got Bobby Wagner. You've got guys like Cody Barton, who's showed some good stuff. You've got even the old Washington guy. He's got Ben Burkervin, I think. I like that linebacker room a lot. And Bobby Wagner can still play. I think Christian Harris is probably going to end up being a really good prospect, and it's hard to really hate on a team for just taking a good player. Like if Harris is there in the middle of the second round, could end up being a really good player for them. But I do agree, like that's probably their last need other than quarterback and receiver. From Royal Awesome, who are your top 5 head coaches currently in the NFL? I wrote this one down. So I got Shanahan number 1. I've got Belichick number 2 still. I'm not going to budge off of that. That Patriots team did a phenomenal job this year. That a lot of people weren't expecting them to be as good as they were. Sean McVay 3rd. Can't really argue with that at this point. Andy Reid 4th. And 5 was hard for me. It would be Sean Payton, but he's gone. So I had a hard time deciding here. Frank Reich, Sean McDermott, Jim Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin, Matt LaFleur, Mike Vrabel. I think those are the next cluster. But I think those top 4 are kind of in a tier of their own. Also, another super chat from Riley. Thank you, Riley. Very generous support today. I thank you again. How much do you value athleticism in your grade of players? Well, upside. Athleticism typically correlates to upside. The more athletic you are, the better things you're going to be able to do, and the smaller your margin for error is. So upside is strongly considered. If you go to my top 10 quarterbacks video, you'll see my grading system. And as you go through there, the individual grading tiers are described a lot of times based on upside. So like a 7.0 grade is the Pro Bowl level cutoff. A 7.3 cutoff is all pro level cutoff. A 6.5 is like boom or bust. So like in those descriptions, you can kind of get a sense of like a guy needs to have a certain athletic upside to project at those certain thresholds, if that makes sense. So that's where athleticism comes in for me. It's easy to sit back and say, take the guy that produced, take the guy with the good technique. But time and time again, those guys get to the next level and they just drop off, and you need these elite athletes. It's a constant balance of everything, right? But I definitely weight athleticism as much as I think I have the right balance, but I definitely value it a lot. I think it's really important. That's a big reason why I was trying to pound the table for Rashawn Gary, right? Okay, from Colatron. What do you think of the Mike Kafka hire for the Giants? I think Kafka has done such a great job of surrounding himself with great coaching talent. Andy Reid, Bieniemy, and now under Brian Daboll. Like, I think he's is a great hire. Like, I think he's obviously a smart guy, a backup in the league for a long time, has aspirations to probably be a head coach someday. I don't really have much to say other than great hire. I don't really know the role he's going to play. I doubt he calls plays or anything. Colatron also asked, do you see them potentially bringing in a new QB this offseason? It's not happening. Without saying too much, it's not going to happen. especially in the draft. The Giants are not drafting a quarterback. I'm just going to say that, and I'll leave it there. I would be flabbergasted, if you will, if the Giants took a quarterback. I mean, maybe at their second round pick, like if like Corral or Willis happen to be there, but 5 and 7, it's not happening. And I don't think they trade down for one either. I'm just going to say that much. And you're not signing a free agent to, like, you're not going to go get Mariota or Jimmy G, or like, that's just a waste of time. Like, it's Daniel Jones next year. I'll just say that. And they've got receivers around him. I think they've put about as good of a damn staff as you could possibly put together for a quarterback with Dable and Kafka. Go fix the offensive line, and you could actually have one of the greatest surrounding situations for a quarterback pretty quickly. I might as well take this opportunity to promote to you guys that I'm doing a New York Giants rebuild on my second YouTube channel, TFG Plays. Go check it out. Should be a link in the description below as well. Yeah, we had a great first offseason. Madden rebuild. Go check it out if you're not following my second channel. If you miss my Madden content, that's where it's at on the other channel. So that's TFG Plays on YouTube. Go find it. Okay, we are going to do a couple more mailbag questions here. The wife just sent me a text here. Just about all of the hate speech in the chat. Yes, obviously, any sort of language that was being used in the chat earlier ain't gonna cut it, and you will be saying nothing, and we will be saying goodbye if that's what's going to be going on in the chat in these live podcasts. So y'all can get the fuck out of here with that. I'll just say that. Drip just came in with the super chat. Thoughts on Anthony Lynn as new OC in San Francisco? Excited to see him kind of like learn the Shanahan thing. I've always liked Anthony Lynn. He's struggled with play calling. He doesn't really have this like innovative background, but one thing he is damn good at is coordinating a run game. Like, seriously, he's damn good at that. So he's going to bring some knowledge for Kyle Shanahan, and if he soaks up that terminology, the Shanahan offense, observes Kyle Shanahan for a couple years, I just think it's a great learning opportunity for Anthony Lynn. And maybe he's the guy that finally sticks as an offensive coordinator for San Francisco, because I don't see him getting a head coaching job again, most likely. Maybe he would. I mean, 5 years from now, but I think it's a really good move for San Francisco because he's going to bring something to the table as a guy that can offer fresh insight to run games in the NFL. And like I said, he's probably not going to get poached anytime soon. Okay, we get a super chat question from Matthew Bell. With the Panthers' biggest needs being offensive line and QB, with only one pick in the first 3 rounds, not a lot of cap room, what do you think about a trade with the Eagles where the Panthers send their 4th and 2 5ths for Minshew and Dillard? Panthers could still take a tackle at 6, move Dillard to guard, and have a QB competition in training camp. I don't like Dillard at guard. If he's got a weakness, it's anchor and play strength, especially in a non-Shanahan style offense, which if you're going to get light at guard, typically it's in a wide zone running scheme, which the Panthers don't run. So I don't like him at guard for them. You know, you're probably giving up on Brady Christensen, who's kind of a similar player, but I do like Andre Dillard as a pass protector, and I like him as a pass protector at tackle in that system. So I like where your head's at. It's just not as clear-cut as move him to guard. And I also like Minshew in that system, although I don't really know what their system's going to be, to be honest, because I'm thinking of Joe Brady's offense, which isn't there anymore. Thank you for the super chat, Stack Bundles. Not a question, but appreciate you. You guys are always so generous with your support here, and I'm so thankful, man. Okay, 2 more Patreon questions, and then we'll be on our way. Of the QBs you've finished evaluating for this draft, which one will you consider taking at pick 11 if you were Washington's GM? None of them. You want my honest opinion? If I'm Washington's GM picking at 11, I'm not touching any of these guys. Not touching Malik Willis. I'm not sitting around and wait for 2 years for him. I'd rather go get Jimmy Garoppolo or... I mean, shit. I'd rather sign Marcus Mariota than spend the 11th pick on Ritter or Pickett. I'd rather do like what I did in the mock draft, trade down, see who's there, or just hope one of them's there in the second round. These guys are so tight that I don't really care that much if I have to take any of them. I don't really care who it is, but I sure as hell don't want to waste the 11th pick to find out that he is just the QB 30 to 40 in the NFL that I could pick up off the street or that I already have in Taylor Heineke. Like, do you know how many times I thought watching Kenny Pickett that I said to myself, with him bailing from clean pockets, that I said to myself, he might just be Taylor Heineke. So why would I draft that guy at 11? I don't know. And Malik Willis, like I said, I'm not waiting 2 years. Like, maybe as the GM, I'll be there, but Ron Rivera ain't waiting 2 years. He doesn't have 2 years to take Malik Willis. So I would not take any of these guys. Maybe Carson Strong if my medical team was like, his knee's good to go. You don't have to worry about anything. But that's not going to happen. So a couple more questions coming in. So thoughts on the Josh McDaniels coaching staff. I haven't seen their assistant coaching hires, unfortunately, but I do think he's the perfect scheme fit for Derek Carr. And the second McDaniels went there, I was like, they're going to lock up Derek Carr. Because when you think of McDaniels, you think of that Tom Brady offense, the Mac Jones offense, boom, boom, option route, quick hitter, screen, run up the middle, like typical spread coast offense. And that's the perfect fit for the Raiders with what they have there. So I like the pairing. And I think McDaniels is a really good candidate. Thoughts on the Panthers' hiring of Ben McAdoo from Riley? I forgot that's who their offensive coordinator was as we were talking about the Panthers. But on paper, it looks like a really bad move. And you're already coming from behind because everyone thought firing Joe Brady, except for Panthers fans, right? Because every fan always hates their offensive coordinator. But anyone that's not a Panthers fan thought firing Joe Brady was stupid. So they're already coming from behind. Ben McAdoo, it feels like he hasn't been in the league for like 3 years. So it's easy to look at him and be like, he was under Mike McCarthy, failed for the Giants big time, and now he's been out of the league. Like, that's the definition of a fraud resume, right? Like, you're a fraud under a fraud. But I don't know what he's been up to the last 3 years. Like, if he's been, taking time to self-reflect on his offense and diving into modern concepts and working with coaches and like creating this new scheme, like it could be a good hire. I wouldn't be like that surprised if he came in and had revised his playbooks substantially. There's so much information out there, it's like impossible for him not to. Now, said the same thing about Mike McCarthy when he went to Dallas, and nothing changed there. So, I don't know. On paper, it doesn't look like a good hire, but I'll give him a chance at least. And then from Logan, another super chat. You guys are trying to keep me around here. I see you. I'm not going to leave as long as the super chats keep flowing. But I'm a big Jets fan, a big fan of what you do. Thank you, Logan. I appreciate that. Was just wondering what were your takeaways from the Jets staff at the Senior Bowl. I wasn't too tuned in to the coaching going on. I was paying attention to what is it? Albright? The linebackers coach. I think is it Albright? What's his name? No, not Mike Rutenberg. Did they fire Jeff? Oh. Okay, I'm sorry. Jeff Ulbrich is the defensive coordinator under Salah. So Jeff Ulbrich, I was watching coach the linebackers. He's a stud. Just very like hands-on, like firm coaching style. Like seems to communicate very well with those guys. I was keeping a note on him because I've talked about him, so I wanted to kind of see what he looks like in person. But no, I was more focused on the players and talking to the other media people around me. I wasn't. That wasn't really a priority for me to kind of analyze the coaching staff. It's weird. They kind of blend in as you're going about your business. It's hard to describe, I guess. But yeah, I wasn't really taking too many notes on the coaching staff. I didn't even notice Robert Saleh at all. And I'm not trying to say that reflects badly on him at all. He wasn't on my radar, really. From Vincent, any chance Daxton Hill falls to the Hawks in the second round? Sounds unlikely. I wouldn't count on it, but that'd be a sweet fit, man. That'd be a really sweet fit, especially in that new system where they're going to want 2 or 3 safeties on the field at all times. Okay, one more Patreon question, and then any more Super Chats that come in, I will answer, and then we'll be on our way and continue the second half of my questions and any more questions I get from you guys on Patreon, I will do on the audio-only version of this podcast up tomorrow. But great question here. I love this question from Costa. What do you think the Texans should project Nico Collins as at this point in time after his rookie year? Personally, I thought he struggled to create separation on the outside, and he struggled to create those explosive plays down the field. Nevertheless, there's a lot of buzz from Houston media about him. To be fair, Houston media needs to find something to get excited about, so I can't blame them there. I think Nico Collins, heading into next year, should be viewed as a player that can and will compete for your number 2 perimeter receiver job. So he's like slotted in as either 3 or 4 on the depth chart, basically, in your mind. You've got, hopefully, you're keeping Brandon Cooks around. I think finding a key contributor in the slot should be a priority for them, which can be very much done. And then you go into it and saying, I think you want Nico Collins and you want someone else that'll compete with Nico Collins on the outside. So whether that's an Alan Lazard or, I don't know who all the free agents are, but like Zach Pascal or Laquan Treadwell. I don't know. I'm just naming like kind of guys in that category of like maybe could compete for a 3rd perimeter wide receiver job. You sure as hell are not treating him as your X, and you're not treating him as your slot. But you look at him and say, we hope for big things next year. We don't want to count on him as a full-time starter, but he's wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 as that, flanking perimeter number 2 receiver is to me how you view him heading into next year. I still think he has good upside to be that kind of like Mike Williams, sort of call it Michael Pittman type of like ball winner on the outside who's not a go-to target necessarily, but like good perimeter player. That's where I think Nico Collins should be. Vincent says, thoughts on Sky Clark? No, I have not done Sky Clark yet. I got all my quarterbacks done. I'm dipping into Sky Moore. He's a receiver, right? I'm sorry, I don't have I don't have thoughts on that yet. I can only get so many prospect evals done at a time. I'm working on offensive tackles right now. I usually wait till the combine's done to do my receivers because I think receiver and corner, those workout grades are so important and they really project to the next level. So I won't be getting too deep into the receiver and cornerback classes until after the combine. But again, when I do a guy like Sky Moore, who might be off of my top 10 video for that guy at that position, that's where the Patreon package really comes in handy, because you can load up my draft board. You can see where I'm at in the process, which evals I've done, and you're going to be able to get wide receivers 1 through 60 when all is said and done, with full profiles on all those guys. You can get my written thoughts on all those guys. So that's where the, that's the true value for the draft diehards, is there on Patreon. And that's a great stopping point as well for the podcast. One last promotion of the TFG Patreon. It's patreon.com/ThatFranchiseGuy, where you can support this channel. You'll get that draft access, and you can submit questions to the show, which is another good transition. We're just killing it from a marketing front right now. I will be finishing up my remaining 16 Patreon mailbag questions, along with any more mailbag questions that you guys want to submit for the show, as an audio-only version of this podcast. You'll be able to find that wherever you get your podcasts. It won't be up here on YouTube, so go search Fully Inflated Football Podcast. Follow it, subscribe it, leave a review. Would really help me out if you have that extra couple seconds to leave a 5-star review. It's the only way to really share and grow the audio version of the podcast. And I'm going to leave it right there. I'll see you all tomorrow for the audio-only podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your super chat support. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Let me know your thoughts on how the team, what did we call it? The Fix Your Team segment went. How was the format? Do you want me to do things a little differently there? Definitely let me know in the YouTube comments down below. But until next time, guys, thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Peace out.